So if you've clicked on this video, the chances are that you, like me, are wanting or considering the possibility of putting together a DIY literature degree. So in this video, I am going to bring you, as a fellow DIY literature student, everything so far that has helped me. I am not claiming to be an expert. I am just claiming to want to share what's helped me, in the hope that it might help somebody else that's just a few steps behind me. So in this first video, which is going to be a series all about my DIY literature degree, I am going to share with you what I found out a literature degree even is, what it isn't, what changes it from reading, where your very first resources might be found to put together a literature degree, what's helped me. But I think it's useful to start with your why, because to undertake a project like this, any degree, is a big ask, whether it be a DIY one that you put together yourself or one actually in a university or a place of study. It's a big ask, and you need, I think, to know your why, otherwise it's just going to fizzle out. For me, my why hit home to me fully when I was walking around Oxford last summer with my middle daughter, viewing all the colleges of Oxford University on their university open day. My middle daughter starts university in September of this coming September, and I was there looking around the colleges with her. We had the most wondrous day in Oxford. In fact, that is kind of an understatement. Oxford blew me away, and I've never in my whole time as an adult post-degree course, my degree was in London in the 90s and I did an art degree, but I've never wanted so much to go back to university as much as I did on that day in Oxford. Oxford is absolutely magical. There was a pull that just wouldn't leave me. Secondly, and I think the biggest reason, is the very fact that my daughter is leaving in September. Empty nest syndrome, they call it. Fill that gap with something that I'm excited about and something that I'm really interested in, something that fills me with excitement. And for me, that was reclaiming my reading and embracing that feeling that I felt in Oxford. New shiny egg to put in the nest. Those are very big whys. I would really suggest you defining that first, if not for now, but for later on when it starts to get tricky perhaps. So once you've got your why sorted, you need to think, well, what actually is a literature degree? What even is it? What do people study on a literature degree? Do you even want to do it, or do you just want to read? Is reading and studying literature different? How much different do you want it to be? So what is a literature degree? That's the first question that I tackled. And I discovered, trying to answer that question, another important fact that you'll want to take on board. The fact is, there is no such thing as a set literature degree. It's a very movable feast, and it can change from university to university, from country to country. It can even change from tutor to tutor. Even if you're in a group, a cohort of students, and you're all doing the same degree with the same tutor, it can still be different because you pick your own modules on certain degrees. Some degrees give you an aspect of choice. So you might be sitting next to somebody in a university classroom and still be doing something totally different. There is no set syllabus, and that really surprised me. So there definitely is an element of choice and being able to custom pick what you put into a degree, especially if you're doing it all yourself, and you have no syllabus, and you have no university that you're a part of, and you have no tutor with their own specialisms and interests. It is a big sea of literature that you can pick from to create your own terms, your own years, and your own lessons and your own modules. So it's a movable feast. There is no right or wrong, no matter where you are. So how on earth do you go about piecing it together? I have got some good resources for you. I've got some really useful resources actually. Now, I used a load of university websites, any university I could think of the name of. I clicked it into Google and I went on their English literature syllabus. Some syllabuses just give you a broad overview for the years and the terms. Other universities, they don't let you open up anything. It just says English literature or literature and just leaves it at that. There are some times that you can strike gold doing that, and they let you click open the entire syllabus and then look at all the module choices that students get a choice to pick from each term. So I would suggest that you browse university websites. That I found really useful. Also, the Open University for distance degrees, that site was really clickable and it opened up with slightly more detail. So go on the Open University website as well, put in your degree of choice, and it's there and it's brilliant. Now, for reading lists around the modules, I actually have got 4 fantastic resources that I found on YouTube. Now, the key resources I used to actually really fine hone what it meant to do an English literature degree, what the books were, what I would be studying, were 4 YouTube channels. Now, there's the amazing Benjamin McAvoy's videos. Now, he went to Oxford University, what started this all off for me. So I'm going to link, everything is going to be linked below. Also, Cait over at the channel Cait's Corner, she's just wonderful. She also went to Oxford like Benjamin did, but their structure of their degrees at different colleges with different tutors, very, very different. Really interesting to see how both of these people went to Oxford, and yet their experiences and their study and their areas of study and the books they read, totally different. Like I said, English literature or literature degrees, they are a moving feast. So that's 2 fantastic channels. Another fantastic book channel where she charts her degree study is Claire Fenby Warren's videos. Now, Claire is another English student. She went to York University, so we've got 2 Oxford University students and 1 at York. And then I went over to Emma's videos over at Emmy. She did a split English literature with a classics degree, so it was a part split degree, but it gave me a taste of what that degree course might be like overseas, not just in Oxford or in England, but across the pond. So I found with the website research and these 4 amazing YouTubers, I managed to get quite a good grasp of what doing an English literature degree might entail. The similar factor for all of those 4 people's degrees was the timing. A English literature degree is gained over 3 years. You've got 3 terms of study. I know normally universities have 12-week terms. I know Oxford shrinks it down. They only have 8-week terms at Oxford, which is why my daughter didn't apply there. She didn't like the idea of that shrinking down. So between 8 to say 12, 13 weeks of study makes up a term, and you've got 3 years. So that was similar across all of them. However, the plus point of doing a DIY literature degree is you don't have to stick to that study. There was another common feature of listening to people on literature degree courses talking. They were exhausted. They were never able to fully read everything that they were being given. I know that Benjamin McAvoy said he didn't read for a whole year after his degree because it put him off totally. I've heard people in my life say they did English literature at degree level and it put them off because of the pressure and the amount of reading. We don't have that pressure. If we want our literature degree to take 10 years or 15 years and just be ticking over in the background as something fun, we can do that. It also means that we can read full text. We're not just grabbing paragraphs that are vital out of text, which was another common theme that I heard spoken about. That there wasn't time to read a whole book or even a whole essay. You were just finding key points and then moving on. We don't have that. We can sink into the literature. So there are some plus points in not being set to that time frame. But the common time frame, if you want it, 3 years, 3 terms a year, 8 to 12 weeks per term. So now you are being faced with the issue of what components could you choose from to fill up those terms. What modules could you create for yourself? So the first module that I came across was a module where you're reading around a time frame, periods in history of writing. So in Benjamin's degree course, in year 1 he studied the Victorians, 1830 to 1910. In term 2 he studied modernism, 1910 to the present day, and in term 3 of year 1 he studied medieval literature, which is also called Old English, which was 650 to 1350. So the Victorians, modernism, and then medieval lit, those were his 3 terms. In Cait's degree course, she also in year 1 had Victorian literature, but she then had the Renaissance, and then she had early modern literature, but this time with a poetry focus. It was the poetry of the early modern era. So you can see there straight away we've got time eras, but we've got different focuses and we've got a different combination. And then Claire, who was studying at York University, she didn't have any modules around time eras until year 3, where in year 3 she studied 19th century writing or Victorian writing and 20th century writing, so modernism and postmodernism writing. So her years 1 and 2 were completely different, and we'll get to that in a moment. And then Emmy over in America, she had no time periods to study at all. I found that overseas in America or in different universities, aren't the old universities like Oxford or Cambridge, there is more thematic study, I think, away from the old universities. It is much more time based in the older universities and in England as opposed to elsewhere. So what other periods could you study? Well, Benjamin in year 2, he had Middle English, which is 1509 onwards. He had the Renaissance in his year 2, also called Early Modern. And he had Restoration literature, 1642 to 1740. He also had Romanticism, 1740 to 1832. So it was Ben's degree course that really was strongly focused on studying through time eras, which would have been his tutor's choice. Cait, over at Cait's Corner, her year 2, she just had one time period of modernism, and then she had a module of Shakespeare. Whereas Ben at Oxford, in a different college, he didn't read any Shakespeare till his year 3, and then they did everything that Shakespeare had ever written in year 3. So time periods. If you have a time period like I discovered, the Victorian period, that you are really interested in, that you already know you like, you may have read some Bronte novels and like them, you might like Dickens, then it could be a nice place to start with what you like. If you're anything like me, I was madly writing down dates, because if somebody said to me Restoration period, I didn't have a clue what authors or books were involved in that. Or if somebody said Renaissance period books, not a clue. Up until recently, I couldn't even have told you a Victorian book, to be honest. So what do you do if you're the same as me, if you're trying to find a time period to study but you've got no clue what's in that time period? Well, get your hands on one of these. I've actually got 2 of these. I've got volume 1 and volume 2. Oh my gosh, these are huge anthologies. This is the Norton Anthology of English Literature. These are, I think they're probably about £25 to buy new. I got both of them for under £3 second hand on World of Books. So they do come up all the time on World of Books. I've just actually ordered for £3 again the Norton Anthology of Fairy Tales as well. So they're really useful, and the reason I bought them is because they go through the time periods of literature. So this volume 2 starts on the Romantic period. It gives you the dates 1785 to 1830, and then it gives you authors and books, and it's full of either small novellas, you get the whole thing, or you might get essays, or you just might get extracts. And the Norton books are used, I've seen, quite a lot in university study, because they are only reading snippets, the important snippets, the important chapters, and this is what you'll find in here. But for me, it was the contents pages that I bought these books for, just so I could build that literary landscape of what was written where, and where the time periods are, and what authors belong to which. So in this volume 2, you've got the Romantic period, and then it goes on, and you've got pages and pages of authors and extracts. Then you get to the Victorian age, and it gives you extracts and loads of authors. I can't even pick this up to show you. Then we get to the 20th century and after. In the volume 1, it goes further back in time. So you have the Middle Ages, what you could read for that. Anglo-Saxon literature, what you could read for that. You have Middle English literature in the 14th and 15th centuries, what you could read for that. Then the 16th century, 1485 to 1603, all the authors for that. Then you see you have the early 17th century. Here you have the Restoration era and the 18th century. So it's just a nice way of clarifying for yourself just what that time period was. If you don't know what the time period is and you're trying to put together a area of study, that's quite difficult. So if you can pick these up second hand, just for all of the literature it contains and for that timeline, that is a fantastic resource to get right from the get-go. And then another one which might make you smile, which I also bought for the same reason, is this book, 1001 Books You Must Read Before You Die. So I'd seen a few booktubers using this book like as a challenge to tick them off, which I thought was incredibly fun. I love gamifying reading. But what it also does, again, it gives you that timeline. So you've got pre-1800 books, 1800 books, 1900 books, and books of the 2000s, and it puts them all in in publication order, and for each book you have a little précis of the book, you have the first published date, you have any alternative titles. So it starts off like right back in the 1500s, then we go to the 1600s, so you've got key books all the way through, all the way up to Jane Austen and through her era, and then through to the Victorian period, and it just gives you a really nice place to go and choose your books from, and to choose through that idea of time periods. And then of course you can just buy anthologies. So I bought the New Oxford book of Victorian verse. This puts it all together. These are, if I want Victorian poetry for Victorian study, I've got an anthology there. So the Norton anthologies, other forms of literary anthology based around time, the 1001 books to read before you die, it all helped me begin to plan for a time era. So far I have only planned my Victorian term. I am loving it. I'm lost in Victorian literature and I love it, but that is one way to plan for your own English literature degree. What about Emma's literature degree over the pond, or Claire's degree at York, which didn't present many terms studying time eras? What were they doing instead? This is where a thematic approach can come in as well. I'm going to refer to my notes for this. So let's go to Claire Fenby Warren's videos first. What did I find from that? So let me get my notes out that I made. So in Claire's degree at York, instead of doing those history time era based terms, she did some thematic terms. So she didn't really share what she did in year 1, but I've got notes for year 2 and year 3 here. In her year 2 study, year 2 term 1, she did American literature. She also did a module on Gothic and horror reading, which just sounded fantastic. There was a module on romantic writing, which I suppose could be linked to the Romantic period, but she did it with dark romanticism and the Gothic, and then books that showed romantic sensibilities, which included Mansfield Park and plays. So it's a different way of planning it totally. She also did a medium module on comedy, culture and national identity. So it's a more thematic approach where I suppose you would have to research your own book list, unless you like the sound of some of these. And if you go to the videos, she gives you the book lists for those modules, so that's why I'm going to link them below. If we go to Emma's videos about her degree across the pond, now Emma, who did the English Lit and Classics mix, she did the most fantastic module called Space, Time and Physics in Literature, which just sounded absolutely fantastic. Deformed space and time, and I wrote down everything that she studied from that. She also did a module in a term all on science fiction, and then she also took a course on the actual English language itself, which just sounded mind-boggling, about how language is formed and what forms language. So you could come at it from that way, but I think of all the modules that I listened to, then the Deformed Space and Time course just sounded fabulous. So that is another way of putting together a module of study. You could come at it from a thematic approach. Now for me, I really fancy looking at the Deformed Space and Time course that Emma did. I also am coming at it from Gothic literature, trying to put together a Gothic literature study course as well. So some of these lists are going to be super useful for developing that theme. Another thing that is really important to take on board, and it was across all of these degrees, there is a big focus on literary theory, literary criticism and critical thinking. So how to read, why you're reading, how to piece together the essays by reading through different lenses of literary theory. And on all of these degrees, the first term of year 1 and year 2 all seemed to be just based on literary theory. It was the biggest focus. It was the only time that a subject matter was repeated twice over 2 years, and it was across all degrees. So if you do want to feel like you've touched base with the learning and the knowledge that you would have got if you went to university for real, then I do think you need to put some element of literary theory or literary criticism study into the mix. And the channels, they all have fantastic recommendations for books that you can use for studying literary theory, which is totally new subject for me. I'm just starting my study of it now. It is frying my brain a bit, but I think it's supposed to be difficult. It's not supposed to be understood straight away. So you are going to have to build into your time somewhere, I would say at least 2 terms of literary theory, criticism, analysing text, that sort of study. I will be bringing, probably in my next video in this series, a show of all the resources that I've bought to enable me to do just that. Then another thing that was definitely universal across Oxford and Cambridge, and a lot of degrees I looked at actually, is just an area of interest. In the final year, it seemed to be that you went more away from being given your study modules to like coming up with your own area of interest. So that could be anything. For me, I am studying fairy tales, is moving as well into children's literature, so that is a big area of interest for me, just because I love children's literature and I love fairy tales. Like I say, the Gothic as well. I'm going to put the Gothic as an area of interest as well. That is another way of planning one module. It tends to be just one module of that you do. I know I've got 2 with Gothic literature and fairy tales, but it's a DIY literature course. I can do whatever I want. So, but do think of an area of interest to study to complete another module for yourself. And along with an area of study module, there's also a specialist author module where you pick one author and you read everything they've written. So for me with Victorian literature, I am doing it. I want to do all of Dickens' books, and I also want to read all the Bronte sisters' books as well to start with. So on Ben's channel, he gives you a fantastic breakdown of the set authors for each time period, which changes every year. So I wrote it down for the year that he was there, but like I say, it's a movable feast. So if you wanted to pick the Old English period, it was the Beowulf poet, Alfred and the Exeter book. If you wanted to do the Middle English period, you could pick from all of Chaucer's work, or Langland, or the End Town play. I don't even know what these things are, guys. If you wanted to pick the Renaissance period, you could pick from Spenser or Milton or Johnson. If you wanted to pick the Restoration era, you could pick from Marvell or Dryden or Bunyan. If you wanted to pick the Romanticism era, you could read all of Wordsworth or all of Austen, Jane Austen, which would be a really nice pick to do, or all of Byron. If you wanted to do the Victorian era, you could read all of Tennyson or all of Dickens or all of Oscar Wilde. If you wanted to pick the Modernism era, you could read all of Conrad, Yeats or Virginia Woolf. If you wanted to do post-colonial era, you could read all of Walcott, Roth or Friel. And if you wanted to do American literature, you could read all of Emerson, all of Dickinson or all of Faulkner. All of this is on Ben's video, which is so useful. So it just gives you an idea of the type of authors you could pick for picking one author and reading everything for them. So that's a whole extra module. And then we come finally to Shakespeare. In Benjamin's Oxford degree, like I said before, they didn't touch Shakespeare until year 3, and then in year 3 they did their special author module, which I've just spoken about. They did a Shakespeare module where they read everything, every play and every sonnet, and then they did their special topic. So like I'm doing fairy tales, so that's what their year 3 looked like. However, in Cait's corner, Cait on her Oxford degree, when it comes to Shakespeare, they had a Shakespeare summer school between year 1 and year 2, and that's where they did their Shakespeare. Benjamin has said don't leave Shakespeare till year 3, dot it in and read it throughout, and that's the approach that I am taking with Shakespeare. I'm trying to dot it in and just read it as and when it fits in with other reading or mood reading, and I'm trying to do it like that. So that's your content. Just to recap what you could choose for your English literature degree. You could go on a time period and read Victorians or Renaissance or Old English. I've given you the resources to find out what those time periods are, so you can come up with some terms of study for yourself around the time periods. You need to do a special author, so choose one author and read all their works. You can come up with a special topic like Gothic literature or time and space in literature, or children's literature. Whatever special topic appeals to you, you can build in, and then you can build thematic modules as well. So you can see the universities themselves are really playing with this. They're having fun, they're doing things that are interesting. That's just 4 people's experiences of university English literature degrees. It's very varied. I don't think you can go wrong, and at the end of the day, if you're doing a DIY literature degree, nobody is marking you. You can absolutely not go wrong with this. Any study you decide to do, you don't need to get bogged down in the weeds of thinking, is this correct or am I doing something wrong? Because you're having fun with it. It should be, at the end of the day, interesting, mind expanding, life expanding and fun. But having said that, I am challenging myself, especially with Old English writing, to challenge myself out of my comfort zone. I don't want it all to just be fun. I don't just want to read Jane Eyre 25 times, although that would be lovely. I want to challenge myself to read books that are hard and difficult and to get my head around literary theory. Or do forget it if that doesn't appeal to you. If you just want to feel like you've experienced the canon of English literature and you're not interested in reading it through a lens of literary theory or literary criticism, then don't. It's your degree. So it depends how close to a degree you want to get and how much fun you want to have with it. So challenge yourself, but have fun and make it yours. There is no DIY degree police out there. And that brings me to my very last point. We've looked at now what an English literature degree is, but what isn't it? It isn't just reading. If you were paying the money to go for a 3-year degree course at university, it's not just reading. That's why there is that focus on literary theory and study. And this is where I say you get the wiggle room to make it as difficult or as close to reading as you like, because you are in charge of your own DIY degree. But at university, it isn't just reading. The things that set it apart is that focus study in and using literary theory to help you analyse text. It's more of analysing text and criticising text and comparing text. And I think you do that via that breaking down texts with critical analysis and with theories and looking at text through different lenses. You also do it via essays and presenting essays. So I'm going to touch on at the end now, essay writing. Should your DIY literature degree have some element of essay writing in? And I think it should, although I've proved to be very poor about this. I've done one essay and I've been going since January. So Benjamin mentioned that for his degree course at Oxford, they were doing 2 essays a week, always 2 big essays a week to hand in. That was their deadline. He suggested to try and do 1 essay a week or 1 review a week, or to make a video a week if you're on YouTube. Just something where you're sitting down and you're collating your thoughts and you're talking about what you've learned. And I think that sets a literature degree apart from just reading. If you're saying you're on a DIY literature degree and you're putting it together yourself, then I think that element of bringing essay writing in and note taking in and writing your studies is the differential. And for that as well, you're going to have that theory and analysis and critical thinking come into the mix as well for the form of your essays. So I think that's what sets a degree apart from just your reading life. And I think it's an important element. I know that the essay I did, which was comparing Dickens' A Christmas Carol to The Chimes, really solidified what I thought about those 2 pieces of Victorian writing. But it is very tempting when you're at home by yourself just to grab the next book and read the next story. So I do have to rein myself in a bit, slow down with the reading and add more writing in. So a literature degree isn't just reading, so do add some of that writing in. Try and aim for 1 essay a week, and I'm talking to myself now as well. So that's it, guys. That's the very first video in this DIY literature degree series. That was my first bit of research and learning. What is a degree? What isn't a degree? What are the time frames? What are the components? Where do I find reading lists? Where do I find about the literary landscape and timelines? What sort of thematic approach could I use? And what do degrees ask you to do, and where do they fit it in? I hope I've covered all of that. It gives you then a framework for you then to start piecing your jigsaw puzzle together, which for you will look completely different to anybody else's. Just as if you were at university, like I said, your study will be very different from the person sat next to you in that university lecture hall, which will be different again from the person sat next to them. It is a movable feast, which I think is very, very reassuring. So, are you going to take part? Do you think that you might be interested? I've loved it so far. I am so excited about my studies. I'm loving it. I'm soaked in Victorian literature and loving every second. If you find that interesting, I'd love you to share your comments below in the comments box. Say hi to me as well. I'm new to BookTube, and I've left as many resources as I can find for you in the box below. My next couple of videos, I'm going to do one about my Victorian literature module so far and all the books and resources I've got for that. I also want to do a video for you about all the literary theory books and all those extras that I've bought as well. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.